Welcome. Today we are doing a focused analysis of the source materials, covering the incredible journey of Pixar Animation
It
Studios.
really is a remarkable story.
It's this amazing intersection of bleeding-edge computer science and what eventually became a revolution in global entertainment.
Our mission today is to trace that exact evolution. We'll go from Pixar's beginnings as a small, very ambitious computer graphics lab.
All the way to the animation powerhouse we know today.
Exactly. And we'll pay close attention to those defining moments, the technology, the leadership, and, the big shifts in business strategy.
Especially that recent tension between theatrical releases and streaming.
Absolutely. That's a huge part of their modern story.
We have extensive sources here, charting decades of history. It starts way back in the 1970s and goes right through the big box office fence and the structural changes of the 2020s.
So we're going to pull out the most insightful points for you.
And this whole story, it doesn't start in California, as you might think. It begins on Long Island, New York, long before the studio even had its famous name.
That's right. The origin point was the Computer Graphics Lab, the CGL. It was established in 1974 by Alexander Schur.
The founder of the New York Institute of Technology, NYIT.
Right. And Schur's goal was incredibly ambitious for the time. He wanted to use this new computer technology to create the world's first computer-animated feature film.
So this was never just some quiet academic project.
No, not at all. From day one, it was a commercial, cinematic goal driven by a founder who already knew the film industry.
And to make that happen, he needed top talent.
He did. He recruited people who would become foundational to the entire industry. Edwin Catmull, a pioneer in 3D graphics, and Malcolm Blanchard were the first hires.
And they were soon joined by Elvie Ray Smith and David DeFrancesco.
And that was the core group, the original members of the CGL, working out of a converted garage on the NYIT campus.
Now, that ambition didn't come cheap.
Not even close. For the 1970s, the investment was astronomical. Schur poured about $15 million into this research group.
Which is a massive sum for a computer lab back then.
It is. And while it gave the scientists all the cutting-edge resources they needed, our sources show it put a huge strain on NYIT's overall finances.
It really underscores the high-stakes nature of the whole venture.
It does. But that investment paid off in terms of technology. It delivered breakthroughs that, still define digital cinema.
Let's talk about the most impactful one, the Alpha Channel. This was invented by Catmull and Smith.
Right.
For those of us who aren't graphics experts, can you break that down? Why is the Alpha Channel so essential?
It's the thing that makes seamless digital compositing possible. Think of it as a fourth piece of information for every pixel.
Beyond just red, green, and blue.
Exactly. The alpha channel defines transparency. It tells the computer which parts of an image are solid and which parts you can see through.
So it's like a digital version of a matte painting or a piece of glass?
A perfect analogy. Before the alpha channel, blending one digital image with another, say putting a CG character into a real background, it was clunky and inexact.
You see the seams.
You would. But with the alpha channel, you can layer and blend digital objects perfectly. It was absolutely essential for combining computer graphics with live action or traditional animation.
That clarity is crucial. So while they're developing this core tech, they're already working on their film idea.
They were producing experimental frames for a film they called The Works.
But even with all that support, they realized they had a problem.
They did. They realized that to actually make a feature film, they needed to be in a film production environment. They needed the structure of a real studio.
Not just the tech.
Right. And that realization is what sets up their next big move, taking them much closer to the movie business.
And that move is west, when George Lucas enters the story.
Yes. Lucas was fresh off the success of Star Wars, and he shared their vision for digital movie making. He wanted to bring that kind of tech in-house.
So he approached them.
He did. And in 1979, 6 key employees gradually moved over to Lucasfilm, becoming the graphics group.
Which was a part of Lucasfilm's larger computer division.
Right. And at Lucasfilm, their work just accelerated. They started building the precursor to their famous rendering software, RenderMan.
And they called this early version RIAS.
RIAS, which stood for Renders Everything You Ever Saw.
So what was the big leap with RIAS? What could it do that other rendering technology couldn't?
It solved the core problem of computational inefficiency. Back then, rendering complex surfaces with lots of detail was incredibly slow.
It would just overwhelm the computers.
It would, but Arias used a clever process called micropolygon rendering. It only broke surfaces down into tiny geometric bits when it absolutely needed to, right at the final stage.
Ah, so it wasn't trying to calculate everything all at once.
Exactly. That efficiency was the key to handling the massive, complex environments you'd need for a feature film.
And beyond RESIs, they were developing other tools like particle effects for fire and smoke.
And their work started showing up in major films. The Genesis effects sequence in Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan.
And the stained glass night in Young Sherlock Holmes, those were their creations.
That's right. And this is also when the company gets its name.
The name Pixar.
Yeah, it was conceived around 1981 or 82. They had designed a special computer for digital compositing, and someone suggested calling it the picture maker.
Which is a bit bland.
Alvy Ray Smith thought so too. He was thinking about the words pixel and laser and came up with Pixar.
Which then got refined to Pixar.
It did. And it's funny because the name was originally for a piece of hardware, not the creative studio it would become.
That really highlights the tension at that stage. They were a tech company using art to sell their product.
And right in the middle of this, in late 1983, they hired John Lasseter.
He came on as an interface designer, but he quickly started using their technology to tell stories, animating the short film The Adventures of Andre and Wally B.
Right. But that period of stability at Lucasfilm, it didn't last.
By 1983, things were changing for George Lucas.
They were. Following his divorce and a big drop in Star Wars license revenue after Return of the Jedi, Lucas needed capital.
And the graphics group, which had grown to about 40 people, was suddenly looking like a very expensive, non-essential asset.
Lucas realized he would probably have to sell it.
So the need to spin off was driven by things completely outside of their control.
Entirely. And Catmull and Smith were, deeply worried. They thought if the group was broken up, their dream of making a computer-animated feature would just die.
So they decided independence, no matter how risky, was the only way forward.
It was the only way to keep the team and the dream intact. This leads to the formal and very precarious founding of the new company.
In February 1986, the graphics group was officially spun out as a corporation.
With Ed Catmull as president and Alvy Ray Smith as executive vice president.
But even though their ultimate goal was making movies, they couldn't just start doing that.
No, the technology wasn't there yet. Moore's law suggested the computing power they needed was still years away.
So their immediate strategy had to be something else. They had to be a hardware company to survive.
That was the plan. Their main product was the Pixar Image Computer, a very high-end system.
Who were they selling it to?
Mostly specialized markets, government agencies, scientific labs, medical imaging facilities.
But getting the money to even start this independent venture was incredibly difficult.
It was. This is a point people often miss. They were pioneering a market that investors just didn't get.
And the source material says they were turned down by 35 venture capitalists and 10 large corporations.
Almost 50 rejections. It just shows how skeptical the business world was about computer graphics in the mid-'80s. They were close to a huge deal with General Motors.
And it fell through just days before signing.
It did. And this state of financial desperation is what ultimately opened the door for their most famous backer.
And this is where the entire story pivots, the arrival of Steve Jobs in 1986.
Right. Jobs had just been pushed out of Apple, and he was looking for his next thing. He saw the potential in this unique group.
He became the primary investor, the one person who could stabilize them.
His initial investment was absolutely decisive. On February 3rd, 1986, he paid Lucas $5 million for the technology rights.
And put another $5 million in cash into the company as capital.
Instantly becoming chairman and majority shareholder. But that $10 million was just the start of what was basically a very long, very high-risk subsidy.
We need to really understand the scale of this. The image computer was failing, and Pixar was losing money for almost a decade straight.
And Jobs just kept putting more money in. In exchange for more ownership, his total investment eventually reached $50 million.
An enormous personal risk.
It was. But what's so fascinating is that Jobs wasn't just investing in their current product. He was funding a world-class R&D lab that he believed held the key to the future of media.
He was playing the long game.
A very long game. He was patiently betting on Moore's law to make their feature film goal financially viable. If he hadn't kept injecting capital, the company would have folded.
And computer-animated movies would have been delayed for years, probably.
No question.
So while Jobs is providing this financial shield, another crucial relationship is forming with Disney.
Yes, in May 1986, Pixar signed a deal with Disney. Disney bought and used the Pixar image computer and their custom software as part of its own system.
The Computer Animation Production System, or CAPS.
Right, and CAPS was a huge deal for Disney. It automated the whole ink and paint process for their 2D animated films.
It helped them modernize right as they were heading into their big Renaissance period.
It did, and you see the synergy there. The first Disney film made entirely using the CAPS system was The Rescuers Down Under in 1990.
So there was this key technical link long before they were creative partners.
Exactly. But even with that prestige, and Lasseter making these award-winning shorts like Luxo Jr. to show off the computer's power,
The hardware business itself was a failure.
a total commercial failure. Sales were terrible. The only thing offsetting the massive losses was Steve Jobs' willingness to personally cover them.
And that couldn't last forever. The financial reality forced a huge, painful restructuring.
It did. In April 1990, Pixar sold its hardware division. They officially got out of the business they started in.
And the next year was brutal. In early 91, they laid off 30 people, cutting the workforce down to just 42 employees.
It was an absolute moment of desperation. Jobs bought the company outright from the employees and became the sole owner.
He was even thinking about just merging it into his other company, NextT.
Right. They were barely surviving on income from their RenderMan software team and Lasseter's small animation unit, which was making TV commercials.
But then came the real turning point, the moment they could finally aim for their original vision.
The 1991 deal with Disney, a landmark $26 million deal to produce 3 computer-animated feature films.
And that deal completely redefined Pixar. They were no longer a tech vendor, they were a content studio.
And that pivot paid off more spectacularly than anyone could have imagined.
Toy Story.
Toy Story. Released in 1995, it wasn't just a hit, it was a cultural event. The first fully computer-animated feature film ever.
And it grossed over $373 million worldwide.
And this is where Steve Jobs executed the financial endgame he'd been planning for a decade.
The IPO, November 29, 1995.
Perfectly timed to ride the wave of Toy Story's success. It showed investors just how profitable this new medium could be.
The IPO was huge. It traded as PIXR on NASDAQ, and it was the biggest of the year, bigger than Netscape.
The stock opened at $22 and shot up to $45 in the first half hour. Trading had to be delayed.
It closed at $39. And just like that, Pixar's decade of financial instability was over.
And every dollar of Jobs' $50 million investment was validated.
So with the company stable and flush with cash, Jobs took a more active role as CEO.
Right. And they could finally focus. In July 1996, they shut down their TV commercial unit, signaling they were all in on feature films.
Beyond the tech and the money, this period was when they really formalized the creative process that made them so unique.
Yes, the Pixar Braintrust.
It's a famous term, but let's unpack the mechanics of it.
It's a peer review process. All the core creative leaders, directors, writers, head storyboard artists, they would all get in a room and look at each other's work in progress.
And they would give extremely candid notes.
Brutally honest, constructive criticism. But the key was the structure. It was built as a filmmaker-driven studio.
Meaning the notes were suggestions, not orders.
Exactly. The director of the film always had the final say. It was their movie.
Which is so different from the typical Hollywood executive-driven model.
Worlds apart.
Yeah.
In that model, you get mandatory notes from executives who might not share the creative vision.
So the Braintrust created this culture of internal accountability and a focus on story above all else.
And that became their defining competitive advantage.
As the studio grew, they needed a physical space that reflected that collaborative culture.
Which led to the new campus in Emeryville, California, which opened in November 2000.
And the architecture was designed specifically to foster collaboration.
It was. It has these open pathways and central communal spaces. The idea was to maximize the chances for those informal interactions where creative ideas spark.
The sources even note it was built with special foundations for earthquake resilience.
A necessary detail for the Bay Area for sure.
So by the late 90s, they're on top of the world. But their relationship with their distributor, Disney, was starting to get very strained.
It was. And it was all rooted in that original 1991 deal structure, which really favored Disney.
The first public sign of trouble was over Toy Story 2.
That's right. Disney originally planned it as a direct-to-video movie, which meant it wouldn't count as one of the 3 films in their deal.
But Pixar realized the movie was actually really good enough for theaters.
So they demanded it be upgraded to a theatrical release and count toward the deal. And Disney just refused.
But the deeper issue was the deal itself. Pixar saw it as completely inequitable.
It was. Pixar did all the creative production. Disney handled marketing and distribution.
And they split the profits and costs 50-50, which sounds fair on the surface.
But it wasn't. Because Disney kept exclusive ownership of all the story and character rights, the IP.
And they also took a 10 to 15% distribution fee right off the top.
Which meant Disney was guaranteed a profit no matter what, just for being the distributor. And they owned the characters that Pixar was creating.
It left Pixar feeling like a work-for-hire studio.
Which is why the negotiations for a new deal between 2001 and 2005 just kept failing.
Pixar wanted a radical change.
They did. They wanted to finance their own films, collect 100% of the profits, and just pay Disney a simple distribution fee.
And crucially, they wanted to own all their characters and sequel rights.
Which, to Disney, was a non-starter. Giving up the IP meant giving up billions in future revenue from merchandise and theme parks.
So the public disagreements between Steve Jobs and the Disney CEO at the time, Michael Eisner, they just exploded.
They did. In 2004, Jobs publicly announced that Pixar was looking for other distribution partners. He basically declared the relationship over.
And Disney's response was to form its own CG animation studio.
Circle 7 Animation. And its specific job was to make sequels to Pixar's films without Pixar. They were starting with Toy Story 3.
It was Disney's way of saying, we own the characters and we will use them with or without you.
The whole relationship had completely broken down.
But then the whole story takes another sharp turn after Michael Eisner leaves Disney in 2005.
Yes, the new CEO, Bob Iger, immediately reopened negotiations. And his reason for doing so was based on a pretty stark creative realization.
Disney's own animation studio just wasn't creating successful new characters anymore.
Iger tells this story about being at the opening of Hong Kong Disneyland in September 2005. He was watching the parade.
And he noticed something.
He noticed that all the popular new characters, the ones the crowd was excited about, were Pixar characters.
It was a visual confirmation of what the finances were already telling it.
Exactly. Disney Animation had been losing money for a decade. The conclusion was obvious. Disney needed to buy Pixar to get its creative heart back.
And that led to the deal on May 5th, 2006. Disney acquired Pixar for about $7.4 billion in an all-stock deal.
And because Jobs owned so much of Pixar, it instantly made him Disney's largest individual shareholder.
He got a seat on the Disney board.
And the leadership structure of the merged animation divisions was, frankly, ingenious. It was designed to protect Pixar's culture.
Ed Catmull remained president of Pixar, but also became president of Walt Disney Animation Studios.
And John Lasseter became chief creative officer of both studios.
The key thing here is that Pixar wasn't just absorbed. There were specific conditions to keep it a separate entity.
The Pixar name would continue, the Emeryville campus would be kept, and their unique HR policies, like having no employment contracts, all stayed in place.
And the films would be branded Disney Pixar.
Right. And to really enforce that cultural separation, Catmull and Lasseter created what they called the hardline rule.
So what was this hardline rule?
It was a strict policy that prohibited the two studios from borrowing staff or loaning out tasks to each other.
That seems counterintuitive from a corporate efficiency standpoint. Why was that so important?
Because the goal wasn't efficiency. It was cultural preservation. It forced each studio to maintain local ownership of its creative problems.
So if a Pixar film like Ratatouille was in trouble,
they had to solve it themselves, using the Braintrust. They couldn't just ask Disney Animation to fix a sequence for them. It forced them to develop their own creative muscles and maintain their distinct identities.
That makes perfect sense. So after the acquisition, Pixar enters a new phase of expansion.
It does. In April 2010, they opened Pixar Canada in Vancouver to produce shorts based on their existing franchises.
But that didn't last long.
No, it was closed in October 2013. The feeling was that they needed everyone back under one roof in Emeryville to maintain that tight-knit Braintrust culture.
And the leadership structure kept evolving. In 2014, Jim Morris was promoted to president of Pixar, handling the day-to-day operations.
Reporting to Ed Catmull, who's still overseeing both studios.
Then came a really profound and difficult shift in the studio's creative leadership.
Yes. In November 2017, John Lasseter took a 6-month leave of absence, acknowledging what he called missteps in his behavior.
And reports from major outlets detailed allegations of sexual misconduct.
Right. And the source materials indicate that this was a period of significant disruption and, frankly, harm to employees. A change was clearly necessary.
Lasseter officially left at the end of 2018.
And that departure forced a complete overhaul of Pixar's creative management.
The new leadership was put in place shortly after. Pete Docter, a veteran director.
Up, inside out.
He became the new chief creative officer in June 2018.
Which signaled a commitment to keeping that filmmaker-driven philosophy. Jim Morris remained president, and Ed Catmull retired in 2019, marking the end of an era.
And despite all that internal turmoil, the films they were releasing were massive financial successes.
Huge. Incredibles 2 in 2018 made $1.2 billion worldwide. Toy Story 4 in 2019 also crossed $1 billion.
It just confirmed the incredible value of their established franchises.
But then the global pandemic hit in 2020, and it forced a fundamental and very disruptive change in strategy from Disney.
Onward was released right as theaters were shutting down.
It underperformed badly, so it was quickly moved to Disney Plus for free.
And what started as an emergency measure quickly became a corporate strategy.
It did. The next 3 original films, Soul, Luca, and Turning Red All, went straight to Disney Plus with no extra charge.
This was a top-down Disney decision, right? To use Pixar's premium content to drive subscriptions for their new streaming service.
Absolutely. They were prioritizing subscriber growth over theatrical box office, and this created a lot of friction inside Pixar.
The sources say that employees found it hard to grasp. They felt their work, made for the big screen, was being devalued.
Understandably so. And the financial consequences of that pivot became painfully obvious with their first big theatrical-only release after that period.
Lightyear in 2022.
A huge commercial failure. Deadline Hollywood calculated that it lost the studio $106 million.
And that failure had immediate consequences for the creative team.
It did. The film's director and producer were among 75 employees laid off the following year. It showed that box office performance was still the primary metric.
This really highlighted a new market risk. They had retrained their audience.
Doctor said himself, he said, "We had trained audiences that these films will be available for you on Disney Plus late."
So people just decided to wait.
Exactly. Why rush to the theater? But then things started to shift a bit with Elemental in 2023.
It had a weak opening, but then it just kept going.
It had remarkable legs. It made a huge box office comeback, crossing $400 million worldwide. It showed audiences were starting to come back for original animation.
Pixar's president, Jim Morris, later said the film would be profitable once you factor in streaming, theme parks, and merchandise.
But the financial pressure continued, and that led to major structural changes in 2024.
The biggest layoff since the early 90s. In May 2024, they cut 175 employees, about 14% of the workforce.
And this was directly tied to their strategy going forward. It was about reducing the focus on direct-to-streaming series.
And going all in on big feature films for theatrical release.
Right, and that renewed focus on theaters and big IP was immediately validated in the most spectacular way possible.
Inside Out 2.
A true phenomenon. It proved that the audience hesitation was really only for new, original movies, not for the franchises they already loved.
It had the 3rd highest domestic animated opening ever, and the biggest global opening for an animated film. The numbers were just staggering.
It became the fastest animated movie to reach $1 billion globally in just 17 days.
And it ended its run as the highest-grossing Pixar film ever, the highest-grossing animated film of all time, and the 8th highest-grossing film of all time, period.
It was a massive, undeniable success. But then, right after that historic win, the other side of the coin was brutally exposed.
Their next original film, Elio.
Elio had the lowest box office opening for a Pixar film to date, just $21 million domestic. It got crushed by the competition.
It ended up at $154 million worldwide and went to Disney Plus pretty quickly.
And that sequence of events, the record-breaking sequel, followed by the struggling original, it perfectly captures the central challenge Pixar faces now.
How to balance the guaranteed profits from sequels with the creative need to build the new original characters for the future.
It's the core dilemma. Let's talk a little more about their creative DNA. John Lasseter once said their films usually follow a theme of self-improvement.
The main character goes on a journey and learns to appreciate friends and family, a focus on internal emotional growth.
Right, and that focus on meticulous storytelling comes with a very high price tag. Pixar films often cost between $150 and $200 million.
And a huge reason for that cost is a deliberate choice.
It is. They produce everything in the United States, keeping all their artists under one roof in Emeryville.
Unlike competitors who use offshore production to cut costs.
Exactly. But for Pixar, keeping everyone together is essential for the Braintrust to function. So the high cost is baked into their creative process.
And they have these fun traditions, too. The most famous is the actor John Ratzenberger.
He's voiced a character in every single Pixar feature, from Toy Story all the way through onward.
Even in Soul, he appeared as a non-speaking background character, just to keep the streak alive.
Right, and all these little internal connections have led to things like the Pixar theory.
The idea that all the films exist in one single connected universe.
It was popularized by a blog post in 2013, and it just shows how deeply audiences engage with their world building.
So given the success of Inside Out 2, franchise management is obviously central to their future strategy.
It has to be. They have 7 established franchises now, from Toy Story to Inside Out and Coco.
And their philosophy on sequels has really changed over time.
It has. Lasseter used to say, "We'd only make one if we have a great story." After Toy Story 4, they even announced to move away from sequels.
But that commitment has been, walked back.
It had to be. Pete Docter has since confirmed that the studio needs to make sequels for its financial safety.
It's a frank admission that the big franchises pay for the riskier original films.
And their upcoming slate reflects that hybrid approach. You have new originals like Hoppers and Godot.
But they're scheduled alongside big franchise returns like Toy Story 5, Incredibles 3, and Coco 2.
And they've also fully embraced streaming content to support the franchises between films. Things like Doug Days, Cars on the Road.
And the new Inside Out spin-off series, Dream Productions.
It's all about keeping the IP active and servicing the Disney Plus platform.
And the cumulative success is just immense. We mentioned Inside Out 2 is now their highest-grossing film.
But they have a whole library of billion-dollar hits. Incredibles 2, Toy Story 4, Toy Story 3, Finding Dory.
And the critical acclaim matches the commercial success.
23 Academy Awards, 10 Golden Globes, 11 Grammys. Since the Best Animated Feature Oscar was created, 11 Pixar films have won it.
And what's even more impressive is the recognition outside of the animation category.
Both Up and Toy Story 3 were nominated for the overall Best Picture Oscar.
Which just confirms their status as truly exceptional works of cinema, period, not just great animation.
So we have traced this journey from a radical technical experiment at NYIT through its survival, thanks to the vision and capital of Steve Jobs, to its maturation as a creative powerhouse.
With the Braintrust as the core engine, prioritizing story quality above all else.
That's right. And that resulted in an unprecedented run of success.
The more recent history, though, it reveals this ongoing tension between that creative core and the new corporate realities of streaming. The success of Inside Out 2 just highlights the incredible value of their established IP and the necessity of theaters for huge profits.
But the struggles of an original film like Elio show how audience expectations have shifted. The studio is now in this constant balancing act between safe sequels and risky new ideas.
Which are required for their long-term health.
Absolutely. So considering the company's commitment to its expensive U.S.-based production model and its necessary reliance on sequels for financial stability in this volatile market, what might be the structural limits on how many original high-budget films Pixar can realistically sustain if the theatrical performance for new IP continues to vary so dramatically?
Thanks for listening.